And good afternoon, Xavier Muskie fans. This is your Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink talking Muskies basketball. It's been a while since we talked to you, since their fabulous Elite 8 run last spring. So we're going to get to all the things about 2017, 2018 basketball. But before we get there, we will welcome Jim Reaker to the program. And Jim, it's good to have you back. And what's been going on?
Oh, it's been a long summer of lots of traveling, been all over the country, ready to settle in for the winter here and watch some Muskie basketball, though. Got a couple trips planned. Be heading to Madison, Wisconsin next week to see the Musketeers, and then out to Vegas for their Thanksgiving Invitational tournament out there. So, and then I'm going to settle down, just enjoy Muskie basketball and a 2017-18 season that might be historical. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be great. And, of course, they really get off to a start this Friday, the opening of the season. But before we get there, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. This is going to be our traditional start, as far as second-year relative. Something old, something new, something borrowed, all things blue. Take that wedding phrase, but we'll sort of walk through the Muskies site by site, and you can give us an input as to what's going on here. So we'll start with something old. What do the Muskies have coming back from last year's fabulous Elite 8 run? We'll start with that. Who are the returnees that are going to be the stalwarts for this year's season?
Well, lots of experience and lots of quality experience coming back. We'll start, first of all, with a guy who was thrust into a role he probably didn't see coming last year, Quentin Gooden, with the injury to Edmund Sumner about halfway through the year. He was thrust into that point guard role. And at that time, of course, if you remember, the Muskies kind of went through a rough patch there where I think we lost 5 or 6 in a row there. But, now it looks good because of that experience he had in the NCAA tournament. And I just saw him in an exhibition game this week. He looks very, very comfortable there running the point. He doesn't have to score a lot. He's actually he's a true point guard, in the fact that he doesn't need to score. And that's kind of been a problem for the Musketeers a little bit. Sumner was a scorer running the point. And, you really want your point guard to just distribute and drive if he has to. And Quentin, I think, is going to really do a good job this year. Feel comfortable with him. Kaiser Gates, I look for him to have a breakout year. If you recall, last year he was hurt at the very beginning of the season, had minor surgery on his knee, probably missed, if I recall, about 10 games. But he has looked really, really good. Here's a 6'8" guy who, of course, is maybe the best three-point shooter, he's been said. And I see him being more comfortable in a college game and ready to give the Musketeers some quality minutes. Sean O'Mara. Sean had a great tournament, if you recall. He was kind of in a rotation with Rasheed Gaston and Tariq Jones at the end of the year. They were using all three of them for as many minutes as they could get out of them and it gave them 15 fouls. Sean didn't look very good last Saturday. And, in fact, if you read Musketeer clippings, Coach Mack kind of called him out and basically said he needs to start playing like he's a senior and this is his last year. So we know Sean can do it. We know Sean works hard. So hopefully he'll come around. Guy I'm really excited about is Tariq Jones. Freshman last year, he's just a physical specimen. He's great underneath the basket and actually started last week. I look for him to start again tomorrow. I think he's just going to get better and better as the season goes on. And the thing I really like about Tariq, he just has a great infectious personality and attitude. You see it on the floor. He's out there having fun, encouraging the other guys. And I think he's going to have a season that we're going to start seeing some national press on him. Of course, the two that everybody's talking about, a little bit banged up. J.P. McCura did play last Saturday, but he's had an ankle injury, but in basketball, that's almost expected sometime during the season. So he was a little limited in his minutes, but he's bringing back, of course, 14 points per game, great rebounder. And I'll tell you the thing, if you haven't seen the Musketeers yet, when you see him, you will know right away where he spent his off season, because he just looks physically much stronger. And, of course, I think that'll be great to help get him through the season, as he plays so hard and rough that I think he's gotten in the weight room, and you can tell. And, of course, how can you talk about the Musketeers and not talk about Trayvon Blewett? Although a little bit of a scare, I'm still holding my breath, but it seems like everything coming out of the Xavier camp is that he's okay. But there, about 2 weeks ago, was word that he may have torn a rotator cuff. And, of course, that's a very, very serious injury. Then I read a report that it's not that serious. He just needed to rest a little. He has not played in either their closed-door scrimmage with the Ohio State Buckeyes or the scrimmage against Thomas More exhibition, you want to call it, at the college level. But he is back. Of course, when we left last year, we didn't know if he was going to be back, kind of leaning toward the fact that he might be gone, but he is back. And just a point to make, that J.P. McCura and Trayvon Blewett have a distinct possibility of being the second-best duo in Xavier history as far as scoring. They need to score. They said if they score at the rate they've been scoring, I think about 34 points a game between the two of them, they will move into second place. They don't have much of a shot at first, and I think Byron Larkin is part of that first-place duo.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly bringing a lot back, and the one thing we didn't mention, of course, is who they're going to miss. And I guess the big name there is, even though we didn't have him for much of the tournament action, was Edmund Summer, who's now with the Indiana Pacers. He hasn't seen any playing time with him, but he did make the roster and got drafted. Who do you see taking most of Edmund's minutes out of the group you just mentioned?
Quentin. Like he did in the second half of the season. Again, but a completely different role player. Quentin doesn't need to score. Edmund really did need to score. And I like that. You got the scores, I think, in McCura and Blewett. And, there might be nights, and Quentin can drive, and he's actually been in the weight room. He looks a lot stronger. He's a good driver. In fact, that's what he built his high school reputation on, was driving to the basket. But he also, at the end of the year, would hit, a point guard has to be able to hit that open shot when they give it. Otherwise, they're going to play off of him, and if they know he's not going to shoot. And he hit some big three-pointers last year, and I think, again, he'll take up the minutes. It'll be probably shared with Paul Scruggs, a newcomer that we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Yeah, it's good, and it's good to hear that you're talking about scoring, because even though the Muskies are ranked high, 17 or better in most of the polls, Ken Pom has them down as low as 26, thinking that defensive shortcomings might impact the issue of not having the offensive firepower. And of course, you can always say the best defense is a good offense. So if they can put the points on the board, that's going to be great. And that brings us right to the something new portion. Who are the incoming freshmen? Of course, we're going to talk about the borrowed in a little bit, but just the freshmen that are going to come in, and how do you see them fitting in? Who are the big names?
Well, first of all, when we left last March, it was April, our last show probably was in. We thought there would be 5 new freshmen on the roster, and actually 2 of them didn't make it. Kentavious Jones did not qualify academically. I actually just read a story about him this morning that he has actually opted to go to a prep school and will reopen his recruitment for next year for the 18-19 season. Whether the Musketeers will be involved in that again remains to be seen. And then kind of a surprise, although I'll give you a little insight on this, maybe just a theory somebody had. Jared Ritter, the 6'7" recruit from Kickapoo, Missouri. I was looking forward to, if he ever was a starter, being introduced from Kickapoo, Missouri. But that's not going to happen. Jared left the team almost as school started, citing it was just in his best interest that he thought he wanted to be closer to home back around Springfield, Missouri. The insight I was going to give you, this is just a theory. I have nothing to really back this up, that maybe Jared arrived on campus and through some early activities with the team, kind of looked around and started counting and maybe didn't see many minutes for himself, and maybe that's why he left. And I thought, that might be. But the ones that have showed up are three top ones. Paul Scruggs, of course, got the most press. Some people have said he might be the first one and done for Xavier, although I will say in my brief watching them of that exhibition last week, I would put him third on performance so far. But he's a true point guard, although he is somewhat of a scorer. But I did read just recently in an article where he says, I don't have to score. My goal is to help other people score. So that's great coming from a freshman. The one that's really impressed everybody and actually started last week, look for him to probably start again tomorrow, is and maybe not, because I think he was basically starting in Blewett's spot, and everything I read is Blewett will start or play tomorrow. But Najee Marshall, a 6'6" wingman, great shooter, and actually he had 16 points, led the entire team against Thomas More. And then another one, Elias Harding, who's from Georgia. He looked really good. I don't have his stats from the game, but I was just impressed. A lot of times when you see these freshmen the first time, and again, they were playing Thomas More, nothing against them, Thomas More, but they're a Division III team. And, of course, things are going to ratchet up real quick here in a week of the competition. But he looked very comfortable with the speed of the college game. That's the thing. Sometimes these freshmen who are very, very good at high school, it takes them sometimes a half a season, a whole season, just to get up to speed with how many athletes there are on a college basketball floor these days. So those are the three new players, and again, I'm very excited. In fact, that was a little bit like, you got five freshmen, and not all of them are going to get significant minutes. So maybe the fact that two of them have already parted is not a bad thing, as long as we don't have any major injuries.
Yeah, and ESPN has Marshall rated as probably the steal of the recruiting class, and the one that probably might have the most promising college career. And, of course, we can't forget the local walk-on, Nick Vanderpool, who's from Harrison, Ohio, and decided to try to do it. Wasn't recruited, but going to do what he can to contribute to the Muskie faithful there. Well, that leads us to a big something borrowed, and it's just basically going to be a 1-year rental, sort of the grad school thing where you can graduate at one school if you still have eligibility to use it. So tell us about what we're getting from Up Green Bay way.
Karam Cantor, and just if you get the Xavier Nation magazine, there's a nice article that I just read yesterday on it. Filled in a lot of the blanks because he kind of came out of nowhere in the summer. Actually, I think it was May when he decided that he was going to come to Xavier and play with the Musketeers. And, of course, the one thing that most people know is he's Enes Kanter's brother. Enes Kanter actually, I believe, played at UK and is in his 8th season in the NBA. Had a stint with the Jazz. Just recently, the last 3 years, was with the Thunder in Oklahoma City, and just was this year traded to the New York Knicks. So he's had a good career in the NBA. And, of course, and his name it's Karam. You might look at it and think it's Kareem, but it's actually pronounced Karam for the fans. Picked that up last week with the PA announcer. But the story is he's from Turkey, and he actually came to the United States when he was a freshman in high school and played in a high school around the Boston area, I believe, somewhere in Massachusetts. Had a great high school career, was highly recruited in the United States by many schools, and one I'll just throw out there, Michigan State was after him. But he went home and in Turkey, and he was actually offered a contract by one of Turkey's top professional teams. This is right out of high school. And he pretty much said or thought that's what he was going to do. He was just going to sign with this professional team from Turkey. But then he changed his mind in the summer after he had graduated from high school, and he and his family made the decision that he wanted to come back to the United States and play NCAA basketball and prepare himself for possibly a career in the NBA like his brother. Well, the problem was, by the time he made that decision, all the big schools who had recruited him, their rosters were full and nobody had any room for him, except there were two that still had an offer for him, and that was Tulane and then, of course, the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay. And he actually chose to go there without ever visiting. He just knew it was an opportunity. So he's played for the Phoenix, the name of the Green Bay team up there. He played for them the last 4 years. And you might look at his stats. Early on, he didn't score a lot of points. Last year, he averaged 11 points, I think 8 rebounds a game. But you may say, well, maybe he's not that talented. But, again, he was thinking about the NBA. He had put his name out there. He didn't sign an agent. But then, again, he went back and talked to his family, and he had decided again that he needed to play somewhere else. The problem he thought at Green Bay was he didn't think he had teammates that complimented him, that he was the top scorer on the team. He was the best player on the team, and he oftentimes was getting double-teamed. So his thought was, I want to go somewhere for my last year where I have a lot of great talent on the team, so I'm not the focus of the defense, and I think I can play better when I'm surrounded by other players. And, again, he thought he wanted to get into a program where he would get a lot of looks from NBA scouts. And, again, the guy just makes quick decisions. He only visited one school, even though I think I read there were 10 to 12 after him, and, again, some very, very big names. But he came to Xavier, and he said, this is the place. This team is going to give me the visibility I need. It has stars. I don't have to be the star for this team. This is where I want to be. And he said, this is the only visit I'm going to make. And he showed up. So I think fans got to be really excited about him. He's very mature. Again, he understands the game. He's actually won a gold medal when he was playing for the Turkey 18 and under team back a few years ago. So he's one that I think it will take him a little while maybe to fit in. The other thing he could do, he's 6'10", and he can shoot a three. In fact, a couple other stats from last year, he shot 35% from the three-point line. He actually shot right around 50% in field goal percentage overall. So I think he's going to be – you might not see him a lot. He'll be rotating in, but I think as the season goes on, I think he's going to be an important part of the Musketeer team.
Yeah, well, here we'll get to a little bit more in a minute here, but that brings me to the point. A lot of names here. I'm counting up 10 that are considered stars or emerging stars, which in some ways from what we talked about last year is good because we often talked about Xavier not having the depth and having some people having to play a lot of minutes, but does that create the other issue that you've got too many people out there? How does Coach Mack create the team atmosphere that he needs to get them all rowing in the same direction?
Well, that's why Chris Mack gets paid a lot of money. But no, seriously, I think competition's good. And really, if you look at the teams that have gone a long way, the major programs, it's not just 5 guys anymore. And the closer you get to 10 and being able to share minutes with 10 usually has the more successful teams. Number one, it gives you options. If you get foul trouble, it gives you options. If somebody's not scoring, again, in competition, it keeps people working. So, but again, it's a fine line. It's a delicate balance. Again, where would Quentin Gooden be right now if Edmund Sumner had not gotten hurt? Because he wasn't getting very many minutes before the injury to Sumner. And, a lot of times these young players who come out of high school being touted as stars, and then they have to sit, sometimes they get antsy and they want to move on. I mean, we do our college basketball show and talk about the people who move around and transfer. I mean, there's hundreds of them because everybody wants to play now and everybody wants to show their skills now because, of course, the NBA is waiting. So, again, I'll leave that to Chris Mack. He's getting paid a lot of money. He's got a lot of experience with it. Again, you like to have some depth in case of injuries, which we see can happen. But, yeah, sometimes it gets kind of crowded out there with you only have so many minutes you can give them.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to then, all things blue. Looking at it, we're going to talk here in a minute about the overall prognosis for Xavier this season. You mentioned it the other day that, Tom Crean, now working for ESPN, the former IU coach, actually has them predicted to win the national title. And that same sort of poll friend, Fraschilla and Jeff Goodman, have them in the Final Four. And Dan Murphy had Chris Mack as Coach of the Year. So is this the breakthrough year for the Muskies? Maybe the small program without that Final Four appearance that everybody's looking at now that Gonzaga was able to crash through their glass ceiling last year?
Well, I think you can never truly predict a Final Four. Obviously, this may be one of the most talented teams Xavier's had. I think what you shoot for, and I think where Xavier is you should expect to pretty much be in the Sweet 16 every year. And then from there, of course, you're playing very talented teams, and you're hoping that there's good chemistry and maybe a little bit of luck, and everybody's healthy going into that Sweet 16 where you could possibly, and again, the breakthrough, of course, for the Muskies would be to make it to the Final Four. Of course, the ultimate breakthrough would be to make it to the national championship game or win it. And I think a good model you can look at is Gonzaga. Gonzaga's kind of, last year was the first year they made it to the Final Four and ultimately the final game, but they didn't win it. And, of course, it takes it takes all the stars to line up to actually win it. There's just so many good teams out there. And, the fact that the NCAA is a one and done, you have a bad night, you have a bad day, you run into a mid-major who's on a roll one afternoon in the NCAA tournament, and things can end very quickly. So am I going to predict a national championship? No, I don't know if I'd ever do that with any team. But you got to like the chances that this Musketeer team with, they got it all. They got experience. They got youth. They got a lot of talent. And they're playing in a good league that gives them, as we saw last year, made them ready for the tournament. Sometimes we probably fail to remember the Musketeers were only 500 in the Big East last year. They were 9-9. And that, of course, gets overshadowed by the fact that they made it to the Elite Eight again for the third time. But the Final Four, that would make me happy. But I'm sure there are fans out there that are liking that touting. At least it's nice that you get some respect from some expert pundits.
Well, and you hit it right there. The February was pretty dismal for the Muskies, and yet they made that run, and they weren't expected to. So we'll just have to see it. And it's very early in the year, so you never know what's going to happen. But there is some early action that's going to be up there that will define them. I mean, they've got coming up here. They've got Wisconsin on the 16th, and Baylor on the 28th, and Cincinnati on the 2nd. Three powerful programs right out of the gate. Is that going to sort of tell us what's going on, or do we, going back, like I said, we start off with Morehead State on Friday, and we got Ryder. Is it a good idea with having such a new mix to jump out the gate and take on those tough teams and really not care whether you win or lose as long as you're learning things about your squad?
Well, I like the Wisconsin game. Now that is part of the Gavitt, I don't know what they call it, the Gavitt Classic or whatever, where the Big Ten plays the Big East. They match up all the teams. Of course, not everybody. Xavier didn't get to play in it last year because, for obvious reasons, there's 14 Big Ten teams and there's only 10 Big East teams. So 4 teams get left out every year, and Xavier was one of those. They actually, the year before in the inaugural one, they went up and they played Michigan, if you remember, and actually beat the Wolverines very, very soundly and kind of helped spring them forward into that season. They didn't have the highest expectations, but after that win, a lot of people started to look at them. I like that Wisconsin game, and here's why I like that Wisconsin game. Wisconsin is kind of in a rebuilding mode. They lost a lot. I think Ethan Happ is maybe the only returning starter they have. But I like the fact that they have to go on the road to the Kohl Center, which is one of the great venues of college basketball. It's going to be a hostile crowd. It's a Thursday night. And those are the experiences that could pay off down the road, because if you recall last year, Jeff, the Musketeers kind of went through their initial part of the season and weren't really challenged all that much. Had mostly home games. And remember, they went on the road and lost back-to-back games to Colorado and Baylor. And Baylor, of course, turned out to be a superb, great team. Not even sure where they ended up. I think they were at least in the Sweet 16, maybe Elite 8 also. Had a phenomenal team that was highly ranked throughout the season. And Colorado wasn't even that highly regarded, but just the fact they went on the road, I think, was why they lost it. So that'll be a good test early. I actually will be attending that game, so we'll do maybe a show after that game and see how it looks. But then I also like the trip to Vegas again. Going on the road with and going into a hostile. Well, that won't be as hostile because it's a neutral site. But I like those games early, and it's gonna be a great time in Cincinnati this winter because the Bearcats, I believe, in most polls are rated above the Musketeers, and everybody knows that's a rivalry game. And actually at the Cintas Center this year, that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, lots of great college basketball around here. As you touted the NKU North on our Trogcast the other day, and Cincinnati, Wisconsin, lots of good things. So let's shift now to the teams that you mentioned. We only finished 9-9 in the Big East. Villanova is just a year removed from a national championship. Jay Wright doing a great job there, and they pretty much dominated at the Big East with the new version of it. But let's go through, what's happened in the offseason that could impact things here in this season. Coaching changes, marquee players returning, leaving for the draft, new players, freshmen. What's going on around the Big East?
Well, Villanova, again, is picked to win it, as they should be. They lost Chris Jenkins and help me out here. I want to say Jay Wright. That's the coach. Who's their star? I can't come up with his name right now. But they still have some quality players coming back. And actually, Amari Spellman, I believe, is a freshman that they look to start, probably. Big guy, 6'9", very athletic. So they're at the top of the heap. Everybody's looking at Seton Hall, returning Angel Delgado, one of the best players in the Big East, one of the best rebounders in the entire country, and Kadeem Carrington with him. They will be strong. And a lot of people looking at Providence, who returned almost all of their starters. I think they did return all those starters. So those three with Xavier, I put in the top echelon of the league. In the middle, I kind of put Marquette, Creighton, and Butler. Marquette lost their big center underneath, but they have a couple recruits coming in that are highly regarded. Creighton lost, I believe, Marcus Foster, who was one of their key players. And Butler lost some key players, but also lost their coach to Ohio State. Chris Holtman went there. So I kind of put those three in the middle. They're quality programs. They have a few players coming back, starters, key players. And then at the bottom, I have ranked, and here's the one that I know the experts would not agree with me, and that's St. John's, who have some quality players, but I'm not quite sure where that program's going. They've had some talent there, and they've had some big wins, but then sometimes they're inconsistent. And then, of course, you got Patrick Ewing taking over at Georgetown. I think he's going to get his feet wet. It'll be tough. And DePaul, I believe, opened their new arena on campus, so that's hopefully something that will get them going. But that's how I kind of see the Big East. But Jeff, the Big East is a grinder. You play everybody twice, so you got to play everybody on the road, and you get to play everybody at home. I don't think you're going to have a champion probably with less than 3 or 4 losses. I think because it takes it out of you when day in, day out, all these places and teams are tough to play. But that's good because it gets you ready for the NCAA tournament. And if you remember last year, they took 7 to the NCAA tournament. Now, most experts, and I would tend to agree with them, are saying that probably 4 or 5 this year is what the Big East should expect.
Well, you're right. People are expecting Villanova to be down a little more, have a few more losses. You got those 2 big coaching changes, Holtman moving to Ohio State after the late separation with Thad Matta, and Georgetown going away from John Thompson III, but continuing the John Thompson tradition by bringing in Patrick Ewing and giving him his chance. But both of those programs, I think Butler was a bit on the wane anyway, and Georgetown just hasn't been able to do it, so we'll have to see what that. And you mentioned the Red Storm there, and they've had some transfers there of late, which could affect what Coach Mullen's able to do with them. But that's a couple of months away almost before you really get into Big East season. So we'll look forward to all that. The season does open up this Friday with the Muskies hosting Morehead State, and then they play Ryder as well before we'll be next on the air. We will be on the air for our Trogcast, two really old guys talking NCAA basketball every Tuesday, and we'll return every Thursday with our Razorcast, which is Reaker and Zink talking Muskie basketball. But before we let our listeners go, Jim, I'm sure you've got something tucked away that you want to share with our fans and try to get me to answer.
You're going to be very disappointed in me. I told you I was very busy this morning. My trivia slipped my mind, but I have a couple other things along your new and blue. For the fans that have not been to the Cintas Center, there's a lot new and there's a lot of blue. They actually, all the walls have been painted a dark navy blue, and it's really, it catches as you walk in because it's kind of like the old boxing arena where everything's kind of dark in the crowd because of those walls being so dark now. And I think they actually put new lighting in there, so it's really bright and gives it a different feel, more like an arena. And, of course, we know the Cintas Center is one of the hardest places for visiting teams to win anyway. I think this just gives it more of an arena feel and aura. They also added the what they call, some people refer to the lookout or the porch, a set of seats above the students at the glassed end. And there's only actually 3 rows there. And I did read somebody saying that they had sat in those seats and said the sight lines are not that great. So I don't know. I haven't been there myself. But that also gives it kind of a different, a more close feel with those seats coming out there. I think I was very impressed. I liked what they did. And they actually added, I didn't go, but my friend went over, and the one top corner, I guess the Norwood Pub or some bar in Norwood that just recently closed, they went in and they took the bar out of it, and they've actually put it at the top of the Cintas Center. So that's a new addition over there on the home side. I didn't go over there to see it, but and they got like just the regular. They got TVs there where they had other games going on. Actually, when we were there on Saturday, they had football games on it. So I think when you walk in, you're going to be very, very impressed. At least I was. Taken back, it's very visually different in there. The other change is that. And any fan who's a season ticket holder has probably been there and seen this or know. A lot of people got moved. That's kind of a controversy. The reason was, down in the bottom, they made the seats wider. So there are not as many seats down in the bottom bowl anymore. So everybody kind of got shuffled. Some people weren't happy with that. Like myself, I've been pretty much in the same seats or the same general area ever since it opened in 2000. So some people weren't happy. They got moved to a different spot. You grow accustomed to your neighbors. You get to know them over the years. So that was something that some people don't like. But they said that the seats down low, they're more comfortable too. They have cushions on them now. Although I did read one fan was complaining they didn't like where they put the cup holder. Some guy said, I'm going to knock my beer over every time because it's right where my elbow should go. So a lot new there and a lot blue there to go along with your theme of new and blue. But I am so sorry. I don't have a trivia question.
Oh, my God. The winds will up instead of down.
I'll give you 2 next week.
Oh, I'm sure you'll have a 10-parter before the season's over. But no, this happens. We just get there. But that's great news of all the things that are going on, and we look forward to an exciting season. I'll finish off with just a little trivia tidbit for everybody, and that is that it was just about 60 years ago this time that the NBA Royals, who'd spent their previous 12 years in Rochester, New York, played their first game in Cincinnati. And the connection there is they often played their games on the Xavier campus at the Schmidt Fieldhouse, especially in those early years. Coach Bobby Wanzer's squad started a 15-year run as one of Cincinnati's go-to sports teams. Then after that, they left for the Kansas City, Omaha area, where they re-nicknamed themselves the Kings so they wouldn't be confused with the not-too-old Kansas City Royals baseball team, and eventually landed in Sacramento, where they still reside. And some local players of note include, of course, UC sensation Oscar Robertson, who played with them for most of his career before being traded to Milwaukee, and Ohio State standout Jerry Lucas. Both spent significant years with the Royals. They were coached for 2 seasons by NCAA champ Ed Jucker from UC, but in spite of making the playoffs 7 times in the 15 years here, including twice to the Eastern Conference Championship Series, they never managed success in Syracuse. And we got to curse the Boston Celtics for that. They almost always got in the way. They were in the middle of their great run. They did win a NBA championship in 1951 when they were in Syracuse. And some players of note from that Pro Basketball Hall of Famers, Maurice Stokes, who we showcased on one of our last year's Razor Cast, Hall of Famer, and Cincinnati legend Jack Twyman is in there. In his early years, Hall of Famer Nate Tiny Archibald played for the Royals. And what's sort of neat, back in those days when people weren't paid as much in the Rochester version, for a couple of years, NFL Hall of Famer and Cleveland Browns quarterback Otto Graham played for him. And Chuck Connors, who was also a minor league baseball star, but you probably know him more for the star of the long-running and still seen often on reruns TV Western,
Rifleman.
So the Royals, a big part of Cincinnati history, not recently. They haven't had an NBA team for many, many years, but many people fondly remember the Royals. So we will be with you again next week about this time for our Razorcast, and we will, of course, be on the air for our Trogcast on Tuesday. Thanks to everybody that makes this possible. Jim, who takes the heavy water lifting for the Xavier Cast with his enthusiasm for it, Mike Goodpaster, and the people with the grueling truth. So we will hear from you again on Tuesday.
Hey. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hold on there. I think I pushed the wrong button there, folks, so stick with me.